Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another astonishing episode of English Podcast for Learning and Improving English. I'm Mistress Alpha, your host and guide on this program through knowledge, growth, and self-improvement. In our podcast episodes, we explore the pathways to personal and professional development. And we also dive deep into topics that matter most in our lives. I'm so happy to have you here today. In this episode, we're diving into a topic that affects nearly everyone in our fast-paced world, which is multitasking. We often hear that multitasking is the key to productivity. Many of us take pride in our ability to juggle multiple tasks at once, answering emails while watching a video, listening to a podcast while cooking, or even texting while walking. It seems like the ultimate skill for modern life. But here's the big question. Is multitasking really making us more efficient, or is it just a myth? In this episode, we'll explore what multitasking really is, how it affects our brain, whether it's actually beneficial, and some strategies for working smarter, not harder. So, grab a cup of coffee, get comfortable, and let's get started. Segment 1. What is multitasking? Let's start with the basics. What is multitasking? In simple terms, multitasking means doing more than one activity at the same time. But here's where it gets interesting. Psychologists say that what we call multitasking is actually task switching. The human brain isn't wired to focus on two complex tasks at once. Instead, it rapidly shifts attention between them, often without us even realizing it. For example, imagine you are writing an important report while checking your phone every few minutes. Your brain isn't processing both tasks at the same time. Instead, it's switching back and forth, trying to refocus each time. Now, there are different types of multitasking. The first type is simultaneous multitasking, like walking while listening to music. This works well because one task is automatic. The second type is switch tasking, like writing an email while talking to a colleague. This is where things get tricky, and we'll explore why in a moment. But first, let's talk about how our brains actually handle multitasking. Segment 2. The science behind multitasking. So, what happens inside our brain when we multitask? Scientists have studied multitasking using brain scans, and the results are surprising. The brain has a command center called the prefrontal cortex. This part of the brain helps us focus, plan, and organize tasks. When we focus on one activity, both sides of the prefrontal cortex work together smoothly. But when we try to focus on two tasks at once, the brain splits its attention between them. A famous study by neuroscientists at the French National Institute for Health and Medical Research found that when people try to multitask, the brain divides its resources. This can lead to more mistakes because your brain isn't fully concentrating, slower work speed because switching between tasks takes time, higher stress levels because the brain works harder to manage competing information. So, despite what many believe, multitasking doesn't make us faster or smarter. It actually reduces our efficiency. Think about this. Have you ever read a book while watching TV? You might think you're absorbing both, but in reality, you probably missed parts of the story in the book or the show. That's because your brain can only truly focus on one complex task at a time. Now, does this mean multitasking is completely useless? Not necessarily. Let's talk about when it can be useful and when it's just a bad habit. Segment 3. When multitasking works and when it doesn't. Multitasking can sometimes be helpful, but it depends on the type of tasks involved. Good multitasking happens when one task is automatic, like walking while talking on the phone. The tasks don't require deep concentration, like folding laundry while listening to a podcast. The second task is passive, like listening to background music while studying. Bad multitasking happens when both tasks need strong focus, like writing an essay while responding to messages. The tasks require different types of thinking, like solving math problems while listening to a news report. It involves switching between tasks frequently, leading to a loss of efficiency. A study at Stanford University found that people who regularly multitask, especially with technology, have worse attention spans and memory than those who focus on one task at a time. So, if you really want to work efficiently, you should think carefully about which tasks to combine and which to separate. Segment 4. The myth of being busy. Many people believe that multitasking means they are productive, but often it just means they are busy. And being busy is not the same as being productive. Here's an example. You sit down to work, but every few minutes, you check your email, reply to a message, and then go back to your work. You feel like you're doing a lot, but in reality, you're just slowing yourself down. Studies show that multitasking can actually make you feel more stressed and exhausted at the end of the day. The reason? Every time you switch tasks, your brain burns energy. This constant shifting creates mental fatigue. So, instead of being busy, we should aim to be effective. And the best way to do that is through something called single tasking. Segment 5. The power of single tasking. Single tasking means focusing on one thing at a time. It's the opposite of multitasking, and research suggests that it's the best way to improve efficiency and reduce stress. Here are some tips to become better at single tasking. Use the 25-minute rule, also known as the Pomodoro technique. This method involves focusing on one task for 25 minutes, then taking a short break before switching tasks. Eliminate distractions, turn off notifications, close extra browser tabs, and create a quiet workspace. Prioritize your tasks, make a list of what needs to be done, and tackle them one by one. Take mindful breaks. Instead of checking your phone between tasks, try stretching or going for a short walk to reset your brain. By practicing these habits, you can retrain your brain to focus better and work smarter, not harder. Conclusion. So, what have we learned today? Multitasking isn't as effective as we think. The brain doesn't actually do two things at once. It switches between tasks. Multitasking can lead to mistakes, stress, and slower work. Single tasking is a much better approach to productivity and efficiency. Now, here's my challenge for you. Try single tasking for one day. Pick an important task and give it your full attention. Notice how much faster and better you complete it. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you feel more productive when you multitask, or do you prefer focusing on one task at a time? Let's keep the conversation going. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with your friends. Join us next time as we explore more topics to help you navigate your English listening skill to the best level possible. Until next time, stay focused and stay productive. Bye for now.